My name is Sharon Harveston. I was born February the 6th, 1941 in La Junta, Colorado. When I was 1 year old, my family moved to San Diego, California, where I was raised. My dad was Virgil Lee Epley. He was an auto mechanic, provided very well for his family. Virgil's auto repair was on Union Street in San Diego, California. And I believe he had 5 mechanics that worked for him. And it's a very successful business. And his home was his pride. And so when we lived in government housing until I was 12, and then we moved to Ocean Beach to our first, what I call real home. And he was very proud of it. And on weekends, he was working around the house, improving it. And we had a nice home. It overlooked the ocean. We were 6 blocks from the ocean, and you could see it out of the west side of the house. We had practically all glass windows. And so we had a beautiful view of the ocean. Dad, one of the things he really enjoyed, it was probably one of the few pleasures that he really got out of life, was speedboats. And we had a Chris Craft boat, and we belonged to the San Diego Speedboat Club. And we would go down there a lot on our weekends and races, and we'd go over to Coronado Island and have meals and then come back. And it was, the Speedboat Club was in the harbor, San Diego Harbor. And so we had a lot of fun down there, and had a lot of friends. And Daddy worked on other people's boats, and which he loved doing that. I think that gave him a feeling of accomplishment, was fixing motors and making things run. He was very much the perfectionist. So he was working on your car or your boat, you didn't get it back till it was perfect. And he was that way at home too. Everything had its place and it should be in its place. And he was very, very proud of his home because he worked so hard to get there. And he passed away when he was 53, and Mother was able to sell the business and do okay for herself, and take care of herself. And then she remarried about 10 years later and moved to Lake Isabella, California. And we were kind of sad that we had to sell the house there in Ocean Beach, but she was happy. She, had a companion again, and he liked to travel, so they had a motorhome, and she got to see a lot of the country that she never got to see as with my dad, because Dad was always working. So she had a good time. Her name was Cora Esther Bryce Epley, and she had a hard childhood. Her mother died when she was an infant, and so she lived with her sister part of the time and her brother. She was the youngest, and so she had a pretty hard childhood, which I think made her probably an even better wife and mother, because she just appreciated her family so, and took very good care of all of us. And she gave us lots of love and attention and cooked. She was just a good mom, always. And then she was a great grandmother. I don't know, but kind of felt like maybe my father had some problems maybe with his mom and dad. And then Mother not having a mom and dad, I think they appreciated each other that much more and loved each other that much more, and were just wonderful parents. You couldn't ask for better parents than what they were. Christmas time, Mother and Daddy, they would have big open house for about the week or 2 weeks before Christmas. And she would cook for months, it seemed like, making date candy, divinity, They always had a drink called Tom and Jerry, which is, I think, very similar to eggnog, but it's still different. But this was always a big occasion, and our house was decorated inside and out for Christmas. Every room had Christmas in it. And so it was always a big, happy time. And that's one thing, Mother and Dad they enjoyed the holidays so much, which made it even nicer for us kids. One thing I think I started back here, after I got back here, was the green bean casserole, because the people here, Tommy's family, had not ever fixed that before. But it's real popular now, but back then it wasn't. But Mother was always a good cook. I did not learn to cook till I got married and had to. When we first moved into the house in Ocean Beach, it was just a normal kitchen. But it did have we had a regular table, and then they remodeled the kitchen and built in a booth. It was a rounded booth, and then the table would slide in and out. And then my father, he had the kitchen remodeled and put in new appliances for her, the Thermidor ovens, and it had the heat lamps and that type of thing for her. But it wasn't a big kitchen, it was just probably a normal-sized kitchen. Put it in a dishwasher, so he updated the whole kitchen for her. I wasn't there to wash dishes anymore. Floyd Epley was my grandfather's name. I really did not know them until I graduated from high school. And at that time, my grandmother had passed away, and my grandfather came to my high school graduation. So that was really the first time I ever really remember meeting him. And he was a very kind person. And then when my daughter was born, our first child, Lisa, he came down to see her. And he brought a new wife with him at that time too. And they seemed very happy. But didn't really know them until I was an adult. I did not know my grandparents on my mother's side. We didn't do a whole lot as a family, except the speedboat thing. Sometimes we'd go up to the different lakes with different friends and go up to Bass Lake and go up to Yosemite Park and such, just within California. Only one trip that we made back to Kansas, but we didn't really take that many vacations because Daddy was always working. And when he wasn't working, then he wanted to be home resting at the house. We'd go, as kids, go down. We could walk down to the theater there in Ocean Beach and go to the movies. It was, so inexpensive. It was like 25 cents to go to a movie back then. And I think you could take $1 and you could go to the movies, get your popcorn, candy, everything you wanted, just maybe for $1, which generally we had already earned with our allowance that in cleaning the house and such. We got paid for doing that. That gave us our spending money. I do remember us getting our first television, which had the round screen. I was still in government housing, so I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old. And we were one of the few families that did get a television. So a lot of the kids and the other families would come over and watch TV. But it was the old tiny, like 12-inch round screen. And that stands out. We had Siamese cats, and Siamese cats really, they weren't pets. They would just kind of come and go as they wanted to. You could pet them now and then, but they were pretty independent animals. And they would go in and out a bathroom window, because in California, you could keep a window open and you didn't have to worry about mosquitoes and that type of thing. And so they would come in and out this little bathroom window at our house in Ocean Beach. And our neighbor, had a dog that we kind of adopted, but it was still his dog, and her name was Fluffy, and she'd come down and play with us there when we lived in Ocean Beach. But she wasn't ours, but we played with her all the time. I'll always remember having to share a bedroom with both of my brothers. We had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and we had Army bunk beds stacked up three tiers. And then we had just like orange crates to put our underwear and that type of thing in. And then Mother made curtains to go over that, to hide that. And then Mother was quite the seamstress too. She could sew anything. My older brother is Vernon Leroy Epley, and he's 2 years older than me. And then I have a younger brother, Donald Lee Epley, who is 2 years younger than I am. And growing up, I had more of a relationship with my younger brother, Donald, because when I became a teenager, I was also dating Tommy, who is my husband. And he would do a lot of things with us, as far as going up into the mountains and playing in the snow and going to the beach and playing volleyball and stuff. He did a lot with us, where Vernon he didn't care that much for the water, and Don and I loved the beach and the water. And so we did more with Don. But now that we've gotten older, Vernon has come to live here at Possum Kingdom Lake with us. He's been here, he and his wife Connie, for about 5 years. And we have always had family reunions here, and like every other year, my side of the family all gets together, and both brothers were coming in, and I think that helped Vern and Connie decide where they wanted to retire to. So they purchased a home here, and they've been here for 5 years. And they moved from Virginia, which really surprised me, because I thought they would go to Florida, because their daughter at that time was in Florida. But they love it here too. So this is a wonderful place to retire to and just enjoy life. As a family with my brothers, it's a pretty close relationship. We get together every other year at Thanksgiving. Their children, my nieces and nephews, come in, and their grandchildren now come in, and my kids all come up, and we put them all up in either other homes here or at the condos, but we're all together and we have a good time. Pam Ehrlich and Evelyn Knox, and we went through junior high and high school together, and kept in touch with them. Evelyn died like 3 years ago with colon cancer, and Pam, she was here in Texas for a while, and we got to see each other. And now she lives back in California, in kind of northern California. We played sports together. We played volleyball and baseball, or softball, girls softball. We did that down at the Ocean Beach Recreation Center. Go to the beach, go to the movies, go up and go sledding, up in the snow. And we had a lot of things in common in sports. We all liked sports. I played volleyball at the recreation center on like Wednesday nights with the adults, actually. And we had like 4 teams that we would, compete against each other. And then in the summertime, playing volleyball on the beach with anybody that wanted to play, have a game.
My name is Tommy Odell Harveston. I was born in a little shack, basically, on the edge of town in Coolidge, Texas. I was born on January 22nd, 1937, during an ice storm, and Dad couldn't get to town with a wagon or anything, so he had to walk into town. And get the doctor to come out and deliver me, and I was delivered in that little house just outside of town. My father's name was actually Rufus Odell Harveston. My grandfather named him for one of his best hands that worked for him on the farm. And after my dad grew up, he didn't like that, so he had it changed to Odell Rufus Harveston. And I know he never wanted anybody to know what the R stood for, so he always said, my name is Odell R. Harveston. And my mother's name was Faye, F-A-Y-E, no middle name, Faye Hopkins Harveston. My mother was a cashier for a parking system in downtown Dallas, and my dad was a parking station manager for about 20 years or so. And after I got out of the military, I got my dad a job with a company that I was working for. It was American Hospital Supply Corporation, and he retired from that job. Mom was always pretty exciting to be around. She was quick with a temper, loving as she could be when she wasn't mad, and they loved to go out and have a good time, and she was always very protective of us kids. Both of my grandparents lived in the little town of Coolidge, Texas, and they were only just a few blocks apart. So I would spend half of my time with each one of them, it seemed like. But I think the thing that I remember most about my grandmother's house was that I used to play out by the garage where they kept an old kettle that they used to wash clothes in, and it had a brick containment where they put the fire, and I used to go play in that. And one time I got lice on me, and they used everything in the world to get kerosene, I believe, to get rid of the lice, so I never played in that anymore. My father's father and mother, also who lived in Coolidge, were farmers. I learned to drive a tractor from my grandfather, and I'd go spend a lot of summers with him down there, and I learned how to pick cotton, which I found immediately I didn't like, but they were always great to me, and I loved them dearly. The only one I can really remember is my grandmother. We called her Grandmammy Hopkins. She passed away when she was about 95. She was just a wonderful, sweet lady. She worked hard in her garden. She kept up her house very nice. I had a great time staying with her. Cooked nice meals for us on a kerosene stove, I remember that. And she's the one that introduced me to sliced tomatoes with sugar on them. And I really grew to love those things. My grandfather was a farmer, and so evidently so was my grandmother. I know they raised 12 children. I guess that's cheaper by the dozen. I didn't know my grandfather hardly at all. He passed away when I was about 4 or 5. I can remember a bit about his funeral, which they held at home back in those days. I had one great-grandfather that I knew, that he's the only one, and that was on my father's side. And I just remember that he was always so grouchy, and he didn't like us kids at all. And he walked with a walking cane, and every time we'd go by him, he'd try to hit us with his walking cane. So I didn't get around him a whole lot. I worked on my aunt and uncle's ranch. They had a ranch in the little town of Tawakoni, Texas, which is between Mahia and Coolidge, Texas. And I worked on the ranch, baled hay and worked cattle, that sort of thing, and mowed sunflowers. I remember Tawakoni Hill was the largest hill around that part of the country, which wasn't very tall, but to me it was a mountain. And one day my uncle said, Tom said, I want you to get on that old Farmall 20 tractor. It was a tractor that had iron wheels. And he said, take that out to the farm and we're going to mow sunflowers today. And I said, okay. Well, I got on it and I took off from his house, which was on top of Tawakoni Hill, and got to the old dirt road that went down to the highway to go out to his farm. And I thought, boy, this old tractor is too slow. And I got to the hill and I said, I'm going to take it out of gear and coast down that hill. And those old tractors only had a left-hand brake, because when you're plowing a field, you always make sure it just will pivot and turn one way, so the brake is on the left back wheel. Anyway, I started down that hill and it got to going fast, and I thought I better stop it. So I pulled on that brake. Well, when I did, it tried to throw me over into a big deep ditch on the left. I was all over that tractor. I mean, it was bouncing me everywhere, and I thought I was going to die. I don't know how I did it, but I made it all the way down to the bottom in one piece, and so was the tractor. But I was scared to death, and I didn't know if I would ever get on a tractor again. I had one very special uncle that I wanted to grow up to be like. It was Uncle Jim. His name was Jim Jackson. And Jim worked at the Mahia State School. It was a school for the mentally retarded children at that time. And I used to go down and spend some Christmases with them and got to know all the kids there, and they all just loved Jim to death. Jim was a very handsome man. He was a little over 6 foot tall. And he had a son, Wayne Jackson, that grew up to be very much like his dad. He was a nice, kind young man. I used to go down hunting with Uncle Jim. He was an avid quail hunter, and I'd go down about at least 1 or 2 weekends a month during quail season, and we would go out and hunt quail. I remember one time we were out, and I thought I was a pro at hunting quail, so I knew how to act around the dogs. And one day we hit a covey of quail, and they split up, and one dog went with my Uncle Jim and the other one I went to. And when I got there, there was a bobcat about to spring on the dog. He was already set to jump on him, and I raised up my shotgun and fired and killed the bobcat. And my Uncle Jim saw me fire, and you're not supposed to shoot quail on the ground, and I knew that. But anyway, when I fired, he hollered at me, and first time I guess I'd ever seen him a little bit angry at me because I did that. And he said, Tom, you know you're not supposed to shoot quail on the ground. And I said, Uncle Jim, I didn't. And he said, what do you mean you didn't? And he walked up and he looked over there and he said, he saw the bobcat. He said, good shot. I only had one sister. Her name is Peggy. She was married to a young man named Jerry Allen, which was my mentor in the building business, as it turned out. But he passed away at age 34. It was pretty traumatic. He had cancer. I know I had to go over and give him his shots of morphine and that sort of thing because there was no cure for it. And my sister she was just great. She handled everything really the way it should have been handled during that time. And she's always been very protective and very loving towards me. My sister was 2 years older than me. I believe she passed away about 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember. I'm not good at dates, but she left 3 daughters behind. All are just beautiful girls. My sister and I, after my brother-in-law passed away, we went into the building business together. And we built quite a few homes together in the North Dallas area. And a few years later, she married another builder who happened to be her first husband's best friend. And they stayed married until he had a heart attack several years before my sister passed away. But we always had a good working relationship and personal relationship. There was never any conflict. When we were in grade school, I got a pair of boxing gloves one year, and I just thought I was going to be the best boxer in the world. And our neighbors came over and we built us a little ring beside their house. And we got out and boxed at night. We had a street light that we could see each other from. And anyway, he was a larger, taller guy than me. We got in the ring and he hit me too hard. A big mistake. My sister beat the crap out of him. And so we had to quit boxing. I grew up beginning there in Coolidge. I went to elementary school there for a couple of years. And from there, I moved to Dallas and moved over by the Marsalis Zoo. And my memory of that place was we had a maid that took care of us while my mother was working. My dad was in the service in the Navy, and one day the maid took us out for a walk in the zoo, and as we walked between a couple of cages out towards the lion cages, we saw this big old shaggy lion walking down the sidewalk. And I remember the maid looked at my sister and said, "Peggy, is that?" And she looked down and my sister was gone, and she looked over and I was gone. So she took off too. When I was still in grade school in Dallas, we moved to government housing, and we lived there for several years. And my next door neighbor was 2 boys and a girl, and the 2 boys and I became very close friends because his parents became my mother and dad's closest friends. And then we moved from there over to South Dallas into our first real permanent home that my folks bought. And I finished grade school, junior high, and high school at that home. When I went to high school, they had just built a brand new high school there in South Dallas. It was called South Oak Cliff High School. I went into school there in high school in the 9th grade, and that was the only grade that was there at the time. We didn't have 10th, 11th, and 12th because it was a brand new school. And so I was the very first class to graduate from South Oak Cliff. I played baseball, and I've always bragged about the fact that I was on the A string for 4 straight years in high school. But that was easy because there was no grades in front of me. When I graduated from high school, I joined the Navy and went aboard a destroyer escort out of San Diego, California. And a year later, my friend, his name was James Vines, he graduated from the same high school, joined the Navy, became an electrician's mate like me, and got on a sister ship, destroyer escort, and we sailed the Pacific together for 2 or 3 years. And then after we got out, we both moved to the little town of DeSoto, Texas, and we lived less than a mile apart while we were there. So I've known him almost all my life, and he's a very dear friend. We went every place that you can think of overseas in the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, the Marianas, Carolinas, Guam, Philippines, every place. We won, our little ship won a West Coast Championship, fast pitch softball, big tournament they had every year. And so they sent us on a cruise overseas as a goodwill tour. And every port that we went into, we had a ball team waiting to play us, an exhibition game. And so we went to some places where they came out in canoes and picked the ball team up and would take us back into the jungle area where there would be a small college, and they'd be waiting for us with a ball field and a team. So we played teams all over the country. Every country we went to, there was always teams waiting for us. And I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. I tried to get a job in San Diego in civil service, and I tried for 2 or 3 months, and finally I had to come back to Texas, and I knew I could get a job here. And I went to work for American Hospital Supply Corporation, and got up to a point after about 9 years of managing and opening and managing an office in New Orleans. And then we decided that we just didn't like it. So I told them I was coming back to Dallas. But I did come back with a company and stayed for a short time. And my brother-in-law called me and said, "Tommy, why don't you come and go to work for me? Let me teach you to build." And I said, "Okay, great." So I did that. And so then for about the next 35 years, I built homes.
My best girlfriend, or one of them, Evelyn Knox, was dating his best friend on the ship, Jerry Bolton. And that put us together, playing volleyball, and we'd go on. They were on dates, we were just friends, going out with them.
So we would end up going as a couple. And it just kind of escalated from there. We became really good friends, and later I got to thinking a lot about her all the time.
And then we ended up being more than friends.
One of the guys aboard ship was going to have a dance, and I couldn't think of anybody that danced. And I thought, well, I bet his girlfriend knew how to dance, so I called her. And I said, her name was Evelyn, and I asked her if she wanted to go to a dance. And she said, "No, I don't dance." I said, "Why don't you ask Sharon?" That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I asked her girlfriend first. But anyway, we went to dance, and I just had a great time. And I said, "You know what? I really like her." So I started dating her. And I even taught her to dance some. Well, we knew each other for maybe 2 years. And then we were at a little gathering one night.
We were at one of my girlfriend's house at a party, and went outside, and he proposed to me sitting on the steps outside.
I was sitting out on the front porch of their house, and I decided she was the girl I wanted to marry, and so I asked her, and she said yes. Well, when we got up off the porch, I didn't realize it, but I had ripped the back out of my pants. And then somebody called that to my attention, and she said, "Yeah, you just split your pants, didn't you?" I said, "Yep, I guess I did."
We, told him that he had just proposed and that we were now engaged, and they said, "Well, you ripped your pants too." So that's always been a joke, that he ripped his pants when he proposed to me.
But that was the best thing I ever did.
We got married on February the 6th, 1959. Oh, February the 7th, I'm sorry, 1959. I had to be 18, so I got married the next day because it fell on a Saturday.
I was the proudest husband at Sharon's graduation from high school. So we were married a few months before he actually got out of school.
It was really a pretty day, and actually rained a little bit, so it was just kind of had a light shower, so everything was fresh and clean, and it was just a really nice, smooth day. We got married at the Methodist Church in Ocean Beach. I'm guessing about 100 people came, friends and relatives. We had the normal church reception afterwards with the cake and the punch and receiving line, and the mints and the nuts, in that day, that's what you did. And then we had another reception at my mom and dad's for our very close friends that were there, and my Uncle Garland that had come down from Long Beach. And then after that, we went to a special restaurant in La Jolla, California. And what stands out there for me was you're eating at this beautiful set table, and then the ocean waves come up on the windows there. We lived in Ocean Beach until after I graduated from high school and Tommy got out of the Navy. And then he tried to find a job there in San Diego because we wanted to stay there. And we were in a garage apartment. It was a garage that people had turned into a small apartment. It was like an efficiency. And we had a kitchen, a little dining table, and then our bedroom was also the living room. The couch made into a bed, and a closet and a bathroom. But at that time, that's really all we needed. And it was like 2 or 3 streets over from my mom and dad's, but it was close also to the naval station. So we lived there until he just couldn't find a job. So then he came back to Texas and got a job immediately, and I then moved out to Texas, and we've been here ever since.
My wife is probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me. She had the family that I always wanted to be a part of, wanted my family to be like. And I think, fell in love with her mother before I did with her. But she's been the light of my life. We've had our ups and downs just like everybody else, but if you put it all together, I couldn't ask for anybody better. If she doesn't like something, she'll let you know straight out. If she does like it, she'll also let you know, but she doesn't cut any corners. She's always told what she felt in her heart. Sometimes that was good, sometimes it wasn't. But it always seems to work out. Sometimes she made me kind of want to crawl under the table when she was telling somebody her opinion. But She has her own opinions, and she stands by them, and that's always been, to me, a real quality about her.
Everybody likes Tommy. He's very kind, very outgoing, very giving of himself, and especially since we're up here retired, him knowing how to repair houses and stuff. And somebody's always calling him concerned about a water leak or this or adding on to their house and asking his suggestions. And he's very outgoing, and he's very good at sports. Right now, he's the oldest guy up here, and he can play better golf than the rest of them. Tommy's a very good golfer. He shoots in the high 70s, low 80s, and he can outdrive any of these young guys up here even. They like to challenge him. And so he's just a wonderful guy. He's a great grandfather, spends a lot of time with the grandkids when they're here, and they love him because he's just so outgoing and loving, and he shows that love to them. So couldn't have a better husband than he is.
I think one of the bright spots in my life was being a father.
We have 3 children. Elisa Joe can too now. And then we have Brian Keith Harveston, and we have Bradley Harveston. Lisa, we call her Lisa. She'll be 50 this year. And then the twin boys, they are 40. And they'll be 41 this year. They were all born at Methodist Hospital in Dallas, Texas, all 3 of them. They're all Texans. And they've all stayed right here in the Dallas area. They've never moved out. Lisa lives in Waxahachie, Brad lives in Maypearl, and Brian lives in Plano.
And the little boy that we lost, he was almost 4 years old. His name was Troy Dean, and he's passed away.
They were good kids. Lisa, she was a little mother to the twins, and I think maybe after helping me raise the twins is one reason she doesn't have any kids, because there was so much work involved. But as she grew as a teenager, then she fell in love with dancing. She would compete in different dance contests and stuff. Very good dancer. And she enjoyed going out and partying, that type of thing, as a teenager and a young adult. And now she does medical transcribing for the autopsy area at the Veterans Hospital. And she's now also learning, Lisa's very intelligent, and she's also learning now to do bisecting and stuff on autopsies to see what actually caused the death of the different veterans. And she's very into the science part of that. Very interesting for her. I couldn't do it, but she really likes it. She's very intelligent. She amazes me at times, and it kind of saddens me in a way that she didn't go on to college, but she was enjoying the party life when it was time to go to college. So, but she's enjoying this very much now.
My daughter was a wild child when she was young, but after she matured and grew up, she went back to school, took college courses to become a stenographer, and then but she went into transcripting, and she works now for the Veterans Hospital, and they never had any children. She's married, but she has a house full of dogs, which she dearly loves. She is a animal activist deluxe.
Brian is into the oil and gas business, and doing very well. And Brad's doing very well selling forklift-type batteries. He works for Interstate Batteries right now.
They're twins. Brad is the youngest of the two by 5 minutes. He works for a company selling batteries for forklifts. He was also a builder. He built quite a few houses at first, but then he's dropped out of that. He's just gone back to selling batteries. He built houses on the side. And he's got a family of 3 children and his wife. And Brian is in the oil and gas business and just recently got into what they call fracking. He's in with some investors that's bought a fracking company, which is doing very well. It's newly started up, and he's doing very well at that. I think Brian probably became a millionaire by the time he was 30. He's got a beautiful wife and 3 children. All of them are adopted from the Ukraine, Russia, and then he's got a little boy that he adopted from Reno, Nevada, and he got him when he was 1 year old. And he's got a better vocabulary than I do. He is just an amazing kid.
We did a lot of hunting. We had a motorhome, and almost every weekend we would go camping someplace, fishing. And then as the kids got older, water skiing. And then we had deer leases, and they were family deer leases. Everybody, had children. And we would go down there generally on Thanksgiving even. And we would have our Thanksgiving generally on a deer lease until we got older, and until you can't afford a deer lease anymore, and not for a family. And but those were things we always did together, was the camping, the motorhome trips.
But Brian is a wonderful Christian man, very athletic. He's too much of a daredevil. He does everything that you can imagine. And he comes down here quite a bit. We pretty much remodeled this house, just the 2 of us. And he's a lot of fun to be around. And he's got us seeing the Lord in a different light now. So I can thank him for that, for sure. I would make sure that I would be at any events that they were in. When from grade school on up, Lisa was great at baseball and track and field, and I would always go up and root her on. I was always there. And the boys were big soccer players, and I was an assistant because I didn't know anything about soccer. And I couldn't get any of them but Lisa to play baseball. So the boys didn't like it. So I said, okay, I'll be an assistant. So I was. And I enjoyed watching them grow up playing the sports that they liked. And just let them do their own thing. And it was fun. As small children, Brad was more the athlete than Brian. Lisa was the best athlete of the whole bunch. And she was that way until she was grown. She was good at everything that she did. Brad was good. He was a karate guy. Both of them were, both boys. But I guess Brad stood out a little bit more than Brian because Brian didn't want to hurt anyone. And even when they played football, Brian didn't want to hit somebody, playing football. So He didn't like that. But then after they became adults, Brad kind of stepped back and he didn't do a whole lot more athletics. And Brian went crazy. He did everything. He's barefoot water skier. He's got wave runners and four-wheelers, and he can do just about anything. He plays golf, so he's a great athlete. We started him off water skiing, and at first we couldn't get either one of them behind the boat, because when we revved the motor up on the boat, it scared them and they'd let go of the rope. So Sharon would go out in the water with a ski line and then with her skis on, and she would hold them and I'd stand on shore. And I'd say, okay, you ready? And they'd say, yeah. Well, I'd run up the hill with a ski line and they'd pop up on top of the water and I could pull them all the way into shore. Well, they got used to that and they liked it. And finally, I got one of them to get behind the boat and I pulled him up. Well, then he really liked that. The other boy, which was Brian, was sitting in the boat and he says, I want to do that. And so we put him out and he got behind the boat. All of a sudden they were both skiing, and they've been skiing ever since.
Brian has 3 adopted children, 2 from Russia and 1, Hayden, from the Nevada area. And then Brad has 2 natural children, Caitlin and Braden, and now he has adopted a girl from the Ukraine, and her name is Kennedy, and she's 13. Caitlin will be 16 in May, and Braden is 12. There's nothing more enjoyable and rewarding in seeing your kids grow up, and then being a grandparent is even more so, because you get to just really love them and enjoy them. You don't have to worry about school. You don't have to worry if they're passing or all those things that parents have to worry about. We just enjoy them, and they spend a lot of time up here with us.
I think next to being a father, even better was being a grandfather. Especially with my grandson. My granddaughter, I just love her to death. I couldn't do a lot of things with Caitlin, my granddaughter, but with Braden, I've done everything with him, and it couldn't have been more fun. It was just a great time in my life, still is, and I always look forward to him coming down. My adopted children, I'm really just getting to know since this past year. The oldest, Alex, doesn't come down here very much, so I still don't really know Alex very well. But Presley is just adorable. Just love her to death. And she and Hayden, which is the young one, he's 3, they come down here all the time. And we're always anxious to see them. They wear us out. But I think more than wearing me out, they wear their dad out. But it's so much fun watching them grow up and doing the things that their mothers and fathers did, when they were little. They're going through the same thing we did, and it's kind of fun sitting back watching that. Well, since I've retired, actually it was kind of hard for a while, but because I was always so used to doing something every day as far as work goes, but it seems like my kids, especially one kid, has gotten me so busy that now I wished I hadn't retired so I could get some rest. We've remodeled this house, and I've stayed real busy, and now I'm enjoying life. It's wonderful up here. This is really God's country, and we've enjoyed it thoroughly. And I've gotten a lot closer to God since we've lived here. We fell out of sync with the Lord when we lost our little boy. We had our faith up to that point. Then all of a sudden, we lost our son, and we were so upset, and I think that we just needed somebody to blame it on, and we couldn't understand why the Lord let something like that happen to us. And so we fell out of faith. We quit going to church, and we stayed that way really until I retired. And just here lately, my son got us to going back to church, and we have a Dr. Dennison over at the ranch. It's a chapel over there that we go to, and our faith is back, and I think we've given our hearts to God, and now we're really enjoying life. It's been great. All in all, I think I've had a great life. I don't know that I'd change anything. There's probably a few things that I would definitely wish I could do over. I'm sure everybody does that. But for the most part, I can't complain. I've had a great life. I think they need to always stop and think before they speak. That seems to be a fault that a lot of people have now, that they don't think about what they're saying before they say it. But just enjoy the rest of your life, because you only have one.
Work hard, but be honest, and help others when you can. Be somebody that you yourself can be proud of.